Namaste.
Casey, it's good to have you back. Marshall, good to see you after a while. So who has something to get us going this evening? Okay, Marshall.
I think this got started with the tapes that you did in India. You talked about the difference between bhakti, devotion, and inquiry. And then this whole idea of guru is kind of up in the work that we're doing in the conscious communication and relationship continued practice, and because we're reading Osho, and I've had a chance to speak with a devotee of Osho, and the experience that he describes is different than the experience that we have here. And I think you were talking about it with how Bhagavan was not looking for devotees. He said you need to inquire, and that's exactly the same thing you say. So I have a sense of it, but I'd like to hear you talk about it.
Bhagavan said, honor the self in you. Basically, bow at your own feet. Now, that doesn't mean that people didn't consider Bhagavan as their guru. Guru is a function, it's not a person. It's a conscious process that is actually happening. It's a transformation of the darkness in consciousness to the light. The very word guru means dispeller of darkness. Darkness is the ignorance that has been acquired and accumulated in consciousness. The primary ignorance is the identification with the body as I. Now, when you're with someone who has already had that spiritual awakening, then the presence of that one, the conscious energy that emanates in the presence of one of that stature, and in that place in consciousness is very freeing and very uplifting to one who is pursuing that enlightenment for themselves. In the East, in India, the guru tradition is more readily recognized, probably any other place in the world, even though it is recognized in other places as well, but India traditionally is more recognized. So traditionally, gurus, conscious teachers, are looked up to and seen in a totally different perspective than ordinary people. And that's rightfully so, but they tend to deitize the guru. And I'm not saying that's inappropriate either. It's in that culture, it's understandable, it's acceptable, and it's quite, you might say, normal. You see. Whereas in our culture, there's nothing in our culture that relates with that. So when you begin to deitize, is that the word? Is that a proper word? Make a deity out of? Deify, that's the word. Okay. A person in the West, that gets kind of suspicious. we in the West, by and large, who have mostly come from a Judeo-Christian or Jewish, purely Jewish spiritual background, we certainly have there's no precedent for that other than Jesus, but Jesus is considered by Christians as a deity, it's God, without even the potential, the possibility of becoming godlike in one's own right. The very notion of that is almost blasphemy among Christians, even though that's not what Jesus taught. So the function of the guru is to give a person, reflect to that person the opportunity to reveal in themselves the same quality of enlightenment as the guru. And so in the East, when that happens and they deify the guru, and most gurus do deify in that fashion, and they have hundreds or thousands in some cases of devotees. Bhagavan had devotees too, even though he did not represent himself as wanting devotees. He never represented himself as even being a guru. On many occasions it was very difficult. In very, very few occasions did he ever acknowledge that he was even that function. He did, but it was under conditions in which he was more or less almost cornered into making that assertion, usually as the form of answering a question directly of some devotee of his who wanted to know. Chadwick in particular was one who said, "Have I been sitting here all this time in your presence, and now I'm going to have to go find a guru somewhere, since the scriptures say that a guru is necessary, and even you say so. So now am I going to have to leave you and go somewhere and find a guru?" And Bhagavan humorously said, "What do you want, a notary stamp?" Or in this function itself, which is a conscious process. When you have the benefit of that, it's quite ordinary, almost difficult not to revere that process for the freeing that it is producing in your life. I certainly have devotion to Bhagavan, great devotion to Bhagavan. And if he were still living in the physical body, chances, I've said many times, I'd probably be there with him, just hanging out like Chadwick and all the rest of the older disciples did. But again, Bhagavan did not himself put himself into that situation. He didn't ask for that. He wasn't wanting that. He did not even encourage that. He allowed it. And in a similar sense, that function is occurring here, and likewise with Bhagavan, I certainly am not looking for anyone to be a devotee of me. To me, it's kind of almost humorous. Not almost, hell it is. I mean, I have great devotion for all of you because we have so much in common. And we're all very close in this common purpose, this common lifestyle, so to speak. And so in that sense, you're like family members to me. I just have a large family. And so I enjoy that, and I experience that. But I am not looking for anything from that other than be a good family member, you know, don't cause Dad any problems. And I'm only speaking metaphorically, of course. Yes.
So now move from that into the idea that I've heard you and others say about be your own guru, that you need to become your own guru.
Exactly. See, the truth is, the self is the guru. The outer form that manifests as the guru, or as that function, is actually the self. It's not different from the self. Self is only, what can you say? Self is self. Self is one, not two. They're not two selves. So the self that we are is the self that all of us are, which is the self of God or Guru. It doesn't matter what name you give to self. God or Guru or self, it's the same thing. It's just one quality, but just 2 or 3 different names for this one quality. One ocean. Many waves, one ocean. The Guru is just recognizing that it's the ocean and it's not the waves. The self is the ocean. Sure, the self is the waves, but the self is not individualized as only one particular wave. The self is all of the waves. All is one. All is an expression of the one self. The Guru is awake to that realization, lives that realization, conducts consciousness in and as and from that realization. And the Guru meditates that, so to speak, that realization to one and all, to his friends. So that when we come here and come together, all that is going on is a meditation of the self to one another. At least it is from my perspective. I'm meditating the self. I'm abiding in the self. I'm living in and as the self. Okay, well, you are too, but if your mind is particularly active, you sometimes tend to forget that. You see? You tend to sometimes identify with the body-mind and come to believe that the body-mind is the self. And as long as you're identified with the body-mind as though the body-mind is the self, that's the ignorance, you see, that has to be dispelled by the light of truth. And again, that's the function of the Guru, the dispeller of ignorance, the dispeller of darkness. Now, where is that taking place? Where does that function actually occur if you're in any way cognizant of that function? See, that's the sneaky one, isn't it? See, where is it going on? See, the point is it doesn't go on outside. It's going on inside. As Bhagavan used to say, the Guru is outside pushing you into the to the self, to the source, to the heart, and inside dragging you, pulling you in to the source, to the heart, to the self. And when we come together here in this context, in this company, both are occurring simultaneously. Don't you feel it? But if you really tune in with what you're feeling, you will find that there is a stronger quality of that pull from within. You're more cognizant of that stronger pull where the self is pulling from within. Can you feel that? Now, we feel that because we're here with the outer quality, which is also radiating and pushing. See? But nonetheless, it's far more prevalent in consciousness of this pull that's going on from the heart. Can't you feel it? And this is the function. And if you give your attention to this pull from the heart, to the point where you attend exclusively to it, that means you attend to this pull from the heart to the exclusion of everything else. It's such a paradox that while you are remaining in that quality, your own destiny will still require its fulfillment in your expression, in the expression of your life. And the question that ordinarily arises from the mind, which is, how could I ever get anything done if I give my attention exclusively to that inward pull, doesn't even arise. Simply because exclusive contemplation of the self, the heart, the source, is inclusive of everything else. Everything else is included in that. Everything. That's just a simple argument of logic. If there is a source, a causative principle and process, that sourcing essence must be the allness. All must be that source. That source is infinite and eternal. So if there's this infinite and eternal source has to include everything, doesn't it? Do we get this? So if we are exclusive in our contemplation of this pure quality of being, this true reality of being, giving our attention fully to that, in fact, surrendering our being totally to that, that then functions in our stead, in our place. And when your life is run by that source, how in the world can anything go wrong? Do we get this? Again, that's the function. That's this function. It's just the revelation of this. See, that's what this function is all about. Well, where's that coming from? Is that coming from is that occurring outside of the source? And where is the source? Is the source outside of you? Do we get this? So do you see what a paradox this is? But it may look like that there's something or someone outside, but outside and inside do not pertain to the self. There is no inside or outside to the source, to the self. How can there be? How can there be an outside or an inside to the source, to the self? Do we get this? So when you give your attention to this process and surrender to this process, to this conscious, call it fact, of your being, that's the guru in you. Again, I'm no different from that guru in you. And again, it's the I am that is no different. That's the I am that is speaking. Not a separate I, you see. There is no separate I. There is no separate one. There is no individual. In fact, there never has been an individual. There is not now, there never has been, nor is there ever going to be an individual. There's only this sourcing essence that is manifesting and expressing as itself in all of these apparent forms, with all of these apparent names. Nonetheless, it's still this one sourcing essence as all of this. Huh? Do you all get what I'm saying? Yes.
What comes to mind is the very thing that Marcia's talking about in our conscious communication is the thing that you said, that people come into our lives to acquaint us with ourselves.
Yes.
So in comes someone who's already realizing living in the heart, and so this one is here to
Acquaint you with yourself.
Acquaint me with that. And so welcome that. Yeah.
Yes. James?
I have kind of a call-in question. It comes from the book Conscious Immortality, and it has to do with Bhagavan's enlightenment. And it was a view of that which the person who called in had not heard before, and they would like for you to comment on it. And it says, the Maharshi once told how he got realization. On the day his father died, he felt puzzled by death and pondered over it for hours, while his mother and brothers wept. By analysis, he reached the perspective that it was the eye which makes the body see, run, walk, and eat. I now know this, but my father's eye has left the body. That day he got jnana. Now, the person's question was, they had understood the classic death experience as the day or the time, the event of his realization. And this kind of is in a conflict with that. There is another thing that refers to this, and I like to give it all to you and then let you comment. It says, the Maharshi told us that when he was a youth, the actual process of obtaining spiritual self-realization took no longer than 20 minutes. The next few years were spent in establishing his realization in gradual adjustments. Now this seems in conflict also from what we have here, where we say that once Bhagavan was realized, he said he never again ventured from the heart, and he was always just permanently the way he had been. I wonder if you could just please comment on that for this person.
Well, I don't see how I can necessarily comment upon that for this person. Because when Bhagavan was speaking, he was speaking probably to different people under different circumstances and talking about experiences that he had had. Okay? Who am I to say when Bhagavan's final enlightenment occurred? How can I say that? I can't say when Bhagavan's final enlightenment occurred. Some feel that his final enlightenment occurred when it happened by Turtle Rock, when he had his second death experience, that was his final, his final enlightenment. And maybe it was. I don't know. I can only speak in my own case. My awakening happened spontaneously in a matter of a few seconds. But then after that, it was a process of stabilizing. And that lasted for several weeks, actually for a couple of years, actually. in stabilizing it. And that's no different than what everyone is going through right here. What's going on right here?
Say more about the stabilizing.
Well, everyone right now is in the heart. Everyone in this room right now is in the heart, and I'm fairly sure that every one of you are aware that you're in the heart. Is everyone here aware as the heart? Are you aware of the heart radiance? Are you aware of this sourcing consciousness that you are?
Mm-hmm.
This presence of being that you are, that is not the body?
Yes.
It's not the mind, that is prior to the body, that is prior to the mind?
Yeah.
Okay, now being aware as that, is there not also probably a seeming tug of war that goes on between the mind and the identification with the body, in which there tends to be a forgetfulness of this sourcing essence, this radiance of the heart, that you actually do know that you are? Huh? Isn't it? So the stabilizing in this awareness of the heart that you are requires the elimination of that which is resisting it. Doesn't it? So the stabilizing in this awareness of the heart that you are requires the elimination of that which is resisting it. Doesn't it? And don't you see that that's what's taking place? That your process is the work of eliminating that which is resisting your continued abidance in the radiance, in the heart radiance. This quality of being that you know is not the body, it's prior to the body and prior to the mind, prior even to thoughts. Thoughts, mind is only thoughts. So if you're observing your thoughts, and you can observe your thoughts from an awareness that itself is peaceful and thoughtless, and you are, you do, even if it's only on occasion. But that's where you are. That's what you are. That's the self. This awareness is without beginning and without ending. It's unqualified, you see, uncaused awareness of being. See? That's what Jesus meant when he said, before Abraham was, I am. This awareness. This awareness which is prior to time, prior to space. This awareness, see? It's not the body, it's not the mind. Now, when you're aware as this awareness, all it now that requires is for you to remain stable in this awareness. To stabilize, you see, in this awareness. Now, what is it that seems to distort this awareness, to conceal this awareness, to limit this awareness, you see? That we call ignorance, unconsciousness. The mind's identification with the body as being the self, with objects as being real in themselves, and then the desire for these objects. Desiring for these objects as though these objects themselves are going to give some sense of satisfaction. Do we see? And this desire for these objects that we feel is going to give us satisfaction is what distorts and hides and conceals the bliss, the uncaused and unqualified bliss and ease of being that we actually are as the heart, as the self. And when we begin to get it, that this identification with the body-mind and with these sense objects, with the world and the objects as though they are real independently on their own, when we begin to get it, that this illusion, this ignorance is also our suffering, then we cease pursuing that. Do we get it? And it's only when we withdraw our attention from that, our association with that whole mechanism, that whole process, we quit touching that, see? Because we get stung by that, see? We're stung into unconsciousness by that, see? And only when we cease from that can we fall back in to the radiance of the self and be that which we really are, see? And that's so the stabilization process is what is called sadhana. See, in truth, in Bhagavan's teaching, sadhana begins from the awakening of the heart. It's not to the awakening of the heart. Do we get this?
Say that again.
It begins from the awakening of the heart. It's not towards the awakening of the heart. See, it's not towards the self. It's not to the self. Here, the sadhana is conducted by consciousness. It's not directed towards consciousness as some remote level of being that is beyond. Are you with this? Yes.
It's a little, you had touched earlier upon the distinction between perhaps Bhagavan's teaching and the classic Western, Bhagavan's teaching and the classic Eastern way of looking at things. For example, just what you just said, Bhagavan talks about conducting from the self, whereas in the East it would be might be a path to, and it also might be just go hang out with the guru and let him do it, rather than doing the inquiry and being your own, working on it yourself. For me, I found myself talking both sides of that just on a buddy call recently. And I'd like for you to talk just a little bit about this too. I found myself saying to the person, well, what's going to be is going to be, try as we might. So just relax, stay in the heart, and let it happen. We can experience from peace, or we can experience it from... Then I found myself talking to them about conscious intentions, and framing conscious intentions so we could bring things about, in this world. And I began to see a paradox, a little bit from what I was saying to them. And you've also touched on this earlier. It's kind of like we Westerners, we're not going to sit back and just, if we can do anything about it, we're not going to sit back and just wait. We're going to, we're going to kill something. We're going to do something, So would you talk about that and that distinction a little bit?
Well, the latter one is included in the former one. Intentionally doing something about it is included in it's going to unfold itself in the way in which it was intended. Do we get it? And it's just that simple. What's going to be is going to be, try as you may to prevent it. What's not going to be is not going to be, try as you may to initiate it, to bring it about. And then all that we do in order to cause it to happen, or all that we do to attempt to prevent it from happening, is included within that. Do we get it? Mm-hmm. Who is the source and cause of your experience? Who?
I am.
There is no one or no thing outside of you that is the cause of your experience. Now that is so basic, it almost doesn't need saying, and yet you can't overstate it. It cannot be overstated. It can never be said enough. Simply because the majority of people overlook it constantly. continually overlooking. Again, what we were talking about earlier, when we consider the body-mind as being the self, and when we consider objects to be objectively real on their own, independent of our consciousness of them, that's persons, places, or things, having physical existence independent of our consciousness of them, and objects of sense then that we pursue as though we can derive some satisfaction either from attaining them if they are pleasing to have, or ridding ourselves of them if they're unpleasant. Do we see? As long as we believe that, we also believe that they are the cause of our experience, don't we? So you see how easy it is to fall into that pattern, that habit of actually believing that events, happenings outside of ourselves, persons, places, and things outside of ourselves are what cause us to feel good or to not feel good, to be happy or unhappy, to feel pleasant or unpleasant, huh? Do we see that? Yeah, who and what is the source of your experience? Do objects actually have existence? Do persons, places, and things actually, in fact, have existence independent of your consciousness of them? If you're not here as consciousness to be conscious of them, how can they possibly exist to you? Do we see? So anything that we believe that is causing us either happiness or unhappiness, we are living in illusion. See? That's ignorance. We're deluded into believing that. Do we see? And because we believe that, then we set out to try to do something about it. Do we not?
Yep.
Now we're creating the very experience that we're setting out to make an adjustment in. But we only think that we're creating the adjustment. Do we see this? We don't see that we are the creator of all of it. We only think that we're the creator of part of it. The part of it that's pleasing. Isn't that so?
Mm-hmm.
And the part that is unpleasant, we either avoid it, run from it, blame it, project on it, or go unconscious. Isn't that right, Teresa? Just look, see? What's happening is what's happening based upon our own sourcing of it, our own creation of it. And we've created the events in our life by our past actions. They are the fulfillment of our previous deeds, good, bad, or indifferent. Now, that means what's going to happen is going to happen, isn't it? Based upon how we've set it up to happen. See, it's still going on in the self. It's not going on outside of the self. So there is no conflict between the two, actually. It's just that the time will eventually come when you will reach the place in consciousness that you truly get this, that you will no longer begin to have to put forth so much effort, or even be inclined to put up any effort to try to make something into something else. Because you'll get it, what it is now, I made it what it is. Why am I making it into something else? Let me just get it, that I am the creator of it. And it really doesn't matter what form it's in, because it is not real on its own anyway. Do we get this? So we can improve it if we want to, or leave it alone. What difference really does it make? It's according to where we happen to be, or maybe it's into whatever game we're into playing right now. Because if you're living in the heart, it's a game. If you're living in the body mind identification, it may be a struggle, an effort, a problem, a difficulty. Do you see? It's according to where your perspective is. That which is a joy to some people may be a curse to others. The same thing, exactly the same event. Do we see? So we're the one that creates it as it is. But we must get that. We must begin to really and truly see that. And begin to then, we say, own it. Acknowledge it for what it is and own it. And be responsible. Take responsibility for it. Do we see? And only when we own it, acknowledge it, take responsibility for it, meaning in fully accepting it exactly like it is, are we then, if we choose to, able to begin to say, well, let's play a game a little differently, and begin to make modifications in the appearance of things. Why can't we? Because we're the creator. We certainly can. And if we do, that was part of it too. You see, in what's going to be, is going to be. Do we get it?
Yes.
So does that give it?
Thank you.
Okay. You had your hand up. I'm surprised you don't have it up again.
Who, me?
You.
Well, I was just going to say, this day I had some time with my daughter, and I was just watching the whole day was a very busy day for my retreat day, but I was just sitting in the heart the whole day, and it was like nothing, as far as I was concerned, was moving. It was just the most exquisite experience. I was sitting absolutely still, and then it's like those in the amusement park when you're sitting there, and then with a wheel, and then they have a road that just goes around and around, and you're not going anywhere. It's just coming to you, and that was the feeling. It was like I was just sitting here still in the heart, and all these events just kept rolling out. And the body just did what it had to do and said what it had to say. And there was no, and that's what you're saying. It just completed itself. What needed to be said was said, and what adjustments were to be made were made. And it was just delightful to watch. It was so perfect.
It's all on the roll.
It's on the roll. Yeah.
Okay. Ethan?
I may not know how I really asked the question, but during the day, I can do self-inquiry and get a clear as I'm moving along doing things. Then, like at my meditation time, all these thoughts come in. Like at 2:45 today, I'm sitting and trying to go to, into the cavity behind the heart, take the eye down into there. And all these thoughts come in that seem to need to be worked out. So, tonight here, the whole time. I do here tonight. I had to do self-inquiry the whole time. These thoughts kept coming in. They were just constant.
Just a battle with the thoughts, huh? So, do you have a question, or are you just stating that? Or what?
I know that it's going to take continuously doing the self-inquiry.
Just keep doing it. What else is there to do? You could go off into all those thoughts.
Can't do that.
But now that you understand, you
Can't do that, Ramama.
can't do that, right?
No.
So just stay with the inquiry. So it's sort of like sword fighting. See, every time a thought comes up, well, you, with a sword of inquiry, you cut it down. With every thought that rises.
It's constant.
Yes, there'll be a continuous barrage.
That's what it was, constant.
That's quite normal.
It's, oh, good.
That just shows that your inquiry is working. That what you're doing is what you're to be doing. See, it's working. Bhagavan used to explain it this way. Everything that is hidden is coming up to be revealed and to be discorded. See? Don't indulge in the thoughts. Stay in the inquiry. See? As you stay in the heart, in the inquiry, in the self, that's what's stirring up the mind. See? That's stirring the mind, but it's stirring up the mind in order to dissipate, to dissolve it, you see. You get that? To thin it down, clean it up, see. It's a thinning process, see. You're thinning out the mind. So stay with the process. It's very normal. The key there now is to stay with the process. Don't be distracted from staying with the inquiry. Yes, you know the thoughts are there. Some of them might be so juicy they want to take you off into them, where you begin to remember this and all of that. Just avoid that. See, once you get that you're doing it, then inquire and bring yourself back into the heart, back into the self. You got it? Okay. Yes.
This is kind of coming back full circle, because this is what the question I had originally was about. In the experience that I've heard people who have gone to or been with other gurus, is that as long as they were in the presence of the guru, they felt themselves in conscious company and felt the heart and the self, and then when they left, they didn't have it. And the difference being that Bhagavan and you talk about self-inquiry, so we actually have a tool to feel the pull from inside.
Exactly. That is the uniqueness of Bhagavan, and that's the uniqueness of Aham. To my knowledge. Now, other gurus will give you other methods that are used as primary instruments or tools for what it would be for controlling the mind, you see, and ultimately for purifying the mind. But there is no tool, there's no weapon as direct and as immediate as inquiry. See? All other tools actually are still more or less kind of elongating the mind. You know, they may be thinning it, but they're elongating it also. With inquiry, you're thinning it and you're sharpening it. See, simultaneously at the same time. With pranayama, you can purify, you can control. Pranayama is using the breath and focusing awareness and attention on the breath. Eventually, you can purify the mind and strengthen the mind to the point where you can control it into just one thought, onto one idea. That helps to control it, but it still prolongs it.
Is that what you were talking about, sadhana to the self versus sadhana from the self?
Exactly. And the other methods that other gurus use is a mantra. They'll give you a syllable, a sound, that if pronounced, the vibrational rate can itself kind of vibrate and cut through the mind, cut through the ignorance, through the conditioning of the mind. And it too is effective for focusing the attention onto one thought to the exclusion of other thoughts. But again that's still in the mind, and that's still elongating the mind. You see, it is a controlling process. It is a purification process. And it is beneficial to those who practice it. But again, not as immediate, not as direct as inquiry. With inquiry, you can complete your sadhana in this lifetime. With other methods, it's only if you're destined to complete. See? Or is it going to happen? You can say, well, it must mean that you were destined to complete with inquiry in this lifetime too. But the difference there is you can bring about your destiny yourself. See? Bhagavan talked about choice. You know? We have infinite choices as far as the mind is concerned. And then the paradox of it is we really have only one choice. The fact is we have many choices. The truth is we have only one. And that choice is as to whether or not we attend to objects, to the objective flow of consciousness, meaning attention turned externally on multiplicity, on many things, this, that, and the other, persons, places, and things, right? You with that? Mm-hmm. Or attention is turned onto the source, to the one. So it's either onto the many or it's onto the one. That's the only choice we have. If you choose the one, the source, the self, you can accomplish and complete it all. Because as I had said earlier, exclusive contemplation of the heart, the source, the self, is what?
Inclusive.
It's inclusive of everything else, including enlightenment. Do we get that? So, you're very fortunate to hear inquiry. You're very fortunate to receive it. You're more fortunate if you get it. And you're still more fortunate if you have the strength to practice it. And you're still more fortunate if your practice becomes steady and constant. Do we get that? And you're still more unfortunate when you no longer have to even practice it. Do we see? It's hearing the truth, considering the truth, deeply contemplating the truth, and then abiding in the truth as the truth. In Sanskrit, that's called Shravana, hearing the truth. Manana, considering the truth, contemplating the truth. Nidhyasana is abiding solely in the truth, and Samadhi is merging, being the truth. Can you feel that? Feel those qualities of quickening just going on in the heart, see, as the heart. Understand that you always already are that which you aspire to in your spiritual quest, if you're aspiring to it. But look at that. See, look at aspiring to it. Quit aspiring to it and simply let go and relax and rest in it. You see the difference? Aspiring to it is still projecting it as is removed, either in time or space, isn't it? Now this is subtle, you know, you certainly want to aspire to it if you don't think that you are it. But even in that activity of aspiring to it, you see, there's a subtlety there of separation from it, differentiation from it, isn't there? We're subtly differentiating ourselves from it as though we're not it. How could you aspire to it unless you feel like you're not it? And if you assume that you're not it, there's where the ignorance is by the assumption, by the wrong assumption that you're not it when the truth is you are it. Do we get this? Feel it. Feel it. Not the words in, I don't want you intellectually, get it intellectually, that's okay. But I don't want you making it into a philosophical belief. If you reduce it to a belief system, then you've missed it. You've lost it. You don't have it. In one sense, it's better to believe it than to disbelieve it. But it's not but belief is not the thing itself. It's not the event. It's not the experience. It's not the quality and essence of it. It's not the substance. Are you with that?
Mm-hmm.
Being is what counts. Feel it. Feel this radiance of being. And as we said when we started out, you are it. That's what you are. You're recognizing right now. You're again knowing that this is what you are. This is the self. This is you. This is prior to the body and this is prior to the mind. You're knowing that. Now, remain in that. Sit in that. That's what I sit means. Sit in this quality. You get it? Remain stabilized in this quality. Just stable. Just remain stable. Stabilized in this quality. How do you remain stabilized in this quality? Very simply, you attend to this quality all the time. You abide in this quality, and if thoughts arise, then you inquire who had these thoughts. What am I doing thinking? Who's thinking? I am. And bring your attention back into this quality and stay stable in this quality. Did we see? Mm-hmm. Simple enough?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty groovy, isn't it?
Haven't heard that in a long time.
Mama said.